You have a firm to run, a team to manage, and a mountain of data to protect. You likely have an IT provider who keeps your computers running. But do you have a qualified individual ensuring you stay on the right side of the law? Welcome to The Qualified Individual, the 10-minute briefing for smart accounting firms. I'm your host, and I'm here to help you bridge the gap between standard IT and total FTC compliance. Every episode, we strip away the jargon to talk about the FTC Safeguards Rule, the hidden risks your MSP is likely missing, and the strategies that protect your client data and your personal liability. So, let's grab your coffee and let's get to work. Let me start with a question I ask managing partners all the time. What do you think a data breach actually costs? Most managing partners I talk to give me an answer somewhere between $100,000 and $500,000. It sounds big, sure, but I want to walk you through what a real breach costs based on actual incidents at firms like yours. Let's say you're running a 15-person CPA firm. You're doing tax, some bookkeeping, maybe some accounting services. You've got client data everywhere: tax returns, bank account information, credit card numbers, social security numbers, the whole picture. And then, one Friday afternoon, your team notices something weird. Unusual login attempts, files moving around that nobody moved. You've been breached. Here's what happens next, and I'm going to give you real numbers based on incident response firms and forensic investigators I've worked with. Let's start with the forensic investigation. This is your first bill. A forensic firm comes in to figure out what happened, who did it, and how long they've been in your systems. These firms charge anywhere from $50,000 to $150,000, depending on complexity. For a 15-person firm, you're probably looking at the lower end, but we're talking $75,000 as a reasonable estimate. And that's if you're quick. If the breach has been going on for 6 months before you notice it, you're investigating 6 months of data. That number goes up. What makes this investigation expensive? The forensic team needs to image every system in your network. That's a full copy of each hard drive. They're looking for evidence. When did the intruder first access the network? What did they touch? What credentials did they use? What tools did they deploy? They're working backward from the moment you discovered the breach to find the entry point. If you didn't have system logs configured properly, and most small firms don't, the forensic team has to work harder. They're reconstructing timelines from fragmentary evidence. That complexity drives the cost up. Here's where governance would have helped. If you had a documented incident response plan, your team would have known to isolate the breached system immediately. You would have preserved forensic evidence. You would have had security logs configured to capture the right information. Instead, the forensic firm spends weeks reconstructing something that should have been documented. A proper incident response plan, documented and tested, reduces forensic costs by 30 to 40% because you've already captured the evidence the investigators need. Next is legal review. You need a lawyer who specializes in data breach notification. Why? Because every state has different notification requirements. Some states want notification in 30 days. Some require you to notify the state attorney general. Some require different notifications for different types of data. Your general counsel probably doesn't handle this, so you're bringing in a specialist. That's another $20,000 to $40,000. But that's not all the legal costs. You're potentially facing regulatory inquiries from state attorneys' general offices. You might face civil litigation from affected clients. If the breach happened because of inadequate security practices, you could face professional liability claims. Your malpractice carrier is going to investigate. And if they find evidence that you weren't following industry standards, that you didn't have adequate access controls, that you weren't monitoring user activities, that you didn't have a security program in place, they're going to look for ways to deny coverage. With a documented governance program, with access control policies, quarterly access reviews, documented and signed off on by a qualified individual, a written security plan tailored to your firm, you have a defense. You have evidence that you were taking reasonable steps. That documentation costs you nothing. It saves you tens of thousands in legal fees because your counsel can argue that you were compliant. Then there's notification and credit monitoring. Here's where the per-person cost hits. The FTC and most state laws require you to notify anyone whose data was exposed. For a CPA firm, That's typically your clients. Let's say the breach exposed 500 client records. The notification itself is about $5 to $15 per person. But then you have to offer credit monitoring. That's another $150 to $200 per affected person for 2 years of monitoring. Do the math. 500 people times $175 average cost is $87,500 just for notification and credit monitoring. Some states even require notification to the credit bureaus. That adds another layer of expense. The notification process itself is more complex than it sounds. You need to send letters to all affected individuals. You need to document who received notification and when. You need to maintain records of the notification process. If a state attorney general asks to see your notification records, you need to produce them. You need to establish a hotline or contact method for affected individuals to get answers. You need to draft a press release explaining what happened and what clients should do. This isn't just mailing a letter. It's a full communication and records management process. A governance program doesn't prevent notification costs, but it reduces the scope of the breach. With proper access controls, an attacker has access to fewer records. With documented data classification, you know exactly what was exposed and to whom. You're notifying 100 people instead of 500. Suddenly, your notification costs are $17,500 instead of $87,500. After that, there's business interruption. You can't operate normally during a breach. Your systems are compromised. You might need to shut down to do the forensic investigation. Clients are calling because they're worried about their data. Your team is stressed and distracted. You're not billing hours. For a 15-person firm, losing 2 weeks of productivity isn't just lost revenue. It's payroll you're still spending while bringing in nothing. That's roughly $30,000 in payroll for 2 weeks with 0 billable hours. But the interruption goes deeper. You're not just losing 2 weeks. You're losing the confidence of clients. Your team is worrying about job security. Staff members responsible for the breach area feel blamed and demoralized. Your firm's operational rhythm is broken. In the weeks after the breach, you're spending time on crisis management, responding to client inquiries, working with counsel, communicating with the forensic firm, instead of building relationships and generating revenue. Recovery from a major breach typically takes 3 to 6 months before operations feel normal again. You're losing 5 to 10% of your billable hours during that period. For a firm with $3 to $4 million in revenue, that's $150,000 to $400,000 in lost billing. Governance reduces this. With proper monitoring and access controls, you detect breaches faster. You might catch an intrusion within days instead of weeks. You contain the breach more quickly. You minimize the operational disruption. Now let's talk about cyber insurance claims. Here's the thing nobody talks about. Even if you have cyber insurance, you're probably not going to get the full payout. Why? Because most policies have retentions or deductibles, usually $5,000 to $10,000 for a small firm. And the insurer is going to comb through your policies and your practices to see if you breached the coverage terms. Did you have multi-factor authentication? Did you patch your systems? Were your password policies up to standard? If you can't prove you did these things, the insurance company denies the claim or reduces the payout significantly. We'll talk more about this in another episode, but the point is, don't count on insurance to cover this. What makes this real is the underwriting questionnaire you signed when you bought the policy. That questionnaire asked you, do you use multi-factor authentication for remote access? If you answered yes and you didn't, you've made a material misrepresentation. The insurer can deny your claim based on that alone. If you answered, we use MFA where applicable, but you can't document which systems have MFA and which don't, the insurer will argue that your answer was materially false. Proper governance means you have documented answers to every question on that questionnaire. You know which systems have MFA. You have logs showing that MFA is active. You have access control policies documented. You have evidence of compliance with those policies. When the claim comes, you have documentation to back up every statement in your application. That's not a guarantee of payment, but it dramatically increases your chances of recovery. And then there's reputational damage. This is the hardest one to quantify, but it's absolutely real. Your firm's reputation is built on trust. You're a CPA firm. people trust you with the most sensitive financial information. When you have a breach, that trust is broken. Some clients will leave. Some prospects won't sign up. You might lose 10 to 20% of your revenue stream as clients migrate to competitors. For a firm doing $3 to $4 million in revenue, losing 15% is $450,000 to $600,000 a year. And that effect compounds. Over 3 years, you're looking at millions. The reputational damage also affects your ability to attract new business. Prospects are more sophisticated now. When they're evaluating CPA firms, they ask, "What's your security posture?" A firm with a known breach history is at a disadvantage. You might be more competent than your competitor, but the competitor doesn't have that liability. It takes 3 to 5 years for reputational recovery, even after you fix the technical problems. So let's add it up. Forensics at $75,000, plus legal at $30,000, plus notification and credit monitoring at $87,000, plus business interruption at $30,000, plus insurance caps at $20,000 equals $242,000 in direct, immediate costs. Add in reputational damage and lost revenue, and you're easily at $500,000 to $1 million in year one alone. For a 15-person firm with maybe $3 to $4 million in revenue, that's 12 to 30% of your annual revenue. In a bad case scenario with significant client loss, you could be looking at $2 to $4 million in damage over 3 years. The $4 million I mentioned in the title? That's not hyperbole. That's what a mid-sized CPA firm can lose when you factor in forensics, legal, notification, the complete loss of a major client segment, and the 3-year recovery period. That's it for today's episode. If what we talked about resonated with you, I'd encourage you to take the next step. Head over to safeguardgrc.com. That's safeguardgrc.com. It's the platform I built specifically for CPA firms to manage everything we've been discussing. Your risk assessments, your policies, your access reviews, your vendor oversight, your training documentation. All in one place, mapped directly to the FTC Safeguards Rule and IRS publication 4557. You don't need to figure this out alone, and you don't need to build it from scratch. Safeguard GRC walks you through it module by module, so you can get your governance program up and running without becoming a security expert. Whether you're just getting started or you're preparing for your next insurance renewal, it gives you the structure and the documentation to do it right. While you're there, check out the book, The Governance Gap, for the full picture of how CPA firms are meeting these requirements without overhauling their operations. And if you found this episode helpful, share it with a colleague. Chances are they're dealing with the same questions you are. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.